Okay, great. We'll get it started because we have a lot of content to cover in an hour and a half. Jamie was concerned that she wasn't having enough time to go over all of the content, and I'm concerned myself. So let's get it started. And we have a new person, looks like, um, that didn't attend. Hi,
I
Lucy.
think Lucy Brooks, yes.
Yes, yes. Thank you for joining us. We'll send you the recording. We are uploading it to YouTube right now from the first meeting. But let's get it started. I need to go over some logistics of the study, some logistics of the website. So you are familiar. We're going to send everything over email, but it is good to go over it today to answer any questions you may have. So I will share my screen to show you the website. You should be able to see the ESCOLAR website. This is where you and your students are going to be accessing the curriculum. And the first thing you need to know is that you will need to log in. You will need to create an account to access our website. But there are a lot of information there that you can access and see with our website. You can learn about our project, who uses our project, how often people visit us, the benefits of our project or our curriculum. You can find some of that research in this link here that we have done over the years. ESCOLAR has been around for more than 10 years now, believe it or not. Most recently, we have been focusing on elementary, but we have developed a program for middle school. So you can see some of the research that we have done over the years. And we have resources for teachers. We have a training course here online that we're going to introduce you to. Have resources for parents, and we have resources for teachers. The ESCOLAR website is available in English and Spanish, so you can switch languages by clicking this link anytime, and you will see the same content but in Spanish. This is true for middle school. All of our middle school units are available in this link. And you can switch back and forth between English and Spanish. The elementary school units are not publicly available. So a lot of times teachers tell me, I cannot find the unit that I'm using in the ESCOLAR website. Well, it is because we don't have them publicly available because we're testing them. They're in a testing phase. We send links to you, so don't try to find them here because you won't find them here. We'll send you links directly to them. But the middle school units are here. And if you know any middle school teachers, you can share this with them. I won't show you the login because that's what I want to start with. You all need to create an account, like I said, and it is free. It is free for everyone, the middle school curriculum in the elementary. So you just have to sign up, click on the sign up button, put your name, username, password, email address, and you will see the terms of condition and agree to them. That's it. You are ready to, after you create your account, you should be able to log in with your username and password. Try to don't use any personal information in your username so nobody can recognize you. And you're gonna need to share the usernames with us because that's how we're gonna link your students to your teacher accounts. So that's why it's important that you don't use any information that can link to you. I'm gonna log in with my account so you can see what happens. It takes you directly to the middle school curriculum, but we're gonna give you the link to the elementary, like I said. Your students are gonna need user accounts too, and we're gonna create those accounts for you. And we're gonna share this spreadsheet with you. And forgive me if I'm signed out of Google, but I'm uploading the video with a different account. But this is how I think you can see the sheet somewhat clearly here. What is that we're gonna need from each of you? Each teacher needs to give us a naming convention of how they want the students to log in. We can create these for you randomly, but we don't want to create accounts that your students are going to be having a hard time with login. We don't know what username you want to give them. You can give them animals or plants, or you can use very basic convention with numbers. You can do whatever you want, but we will need you to fill out this sheet for us with whatever usernames you want to assign to each of your students. You can put the student school ID if it's a number ID. If it has their names, don't do that for us. Just whatever you can link your students with the ESCOLAR accounts from here, from column C and on is what we need. We don't need to know your school ID, but you need to be able to link them to your students. Then we need a password, something easy that students are going to be able to remember. And then we need some general information about your students, like their student special education status, if any. So, and you need to be specific on that. We will need to know what type of disability they have, if they have one, if it's a reading, math, or any other that you know that they have. Also, we need to know if you have any English language learners in your classroom and what language they speak. And if they are not in English language development class, then you just put not applicable. We will need some reading scores from standardized assessments and some math, excuse me, some math scores as well. So please, when Bailey send this to you, fill it out and send it. As soon as we have this filled out, then is when we're going to be able to create the accounts for your students. So students won't be able to access these unless they create their own accounts, but it will take more time if you have them create the accounts. So we send these to us, we'll create the accounts. And then the next step will be to have them do the consent letters. The consent letters, some of you have done them already. Doesn't look like I have any open at the moment, but some of you have completed them online already. I'm trying to go back to my here. I lost you guys. I don't see you right here. There you are. Okay. So some of you have completed the consent letters online. That's the same process for students. But what we need to do when you're in class, you're going to talk to your students about the program, that you're going to be doing this with everyone. So everyone needs to be part of the study because this is the program you chose for them. If they don't want to participate in the study, a student sign the letter saying that they don't want to participate. But what it means to us is that we won't collect data from them. You're still going to be teaching with the program. You're still going to be giving the assessments. You're going to do everything with them like you do with any other students, but we don't collect data. So it's important that you clarify that for them so they don't think that because you're teaching with this program, they're going to sit and do whatever they want in their seat. For parents, we need you to send a printout of the letter home so they can actually read the form more carefully at home and decide whether or not they want their kids to participate. If they don't want to participate, they sign the letter and send them back. But if they are okay with participation, they don't do anything. They keep the letter like they're not aware, and that's it. We usually don't get any letters back, but once in a while, one or two parents don't want their kids to participate, and that's fine. And what it means again for them is that we don't collect any data. We don't collect any data from them, but the students is still gonna have to do everything that we do in your classroom. Okay. what else do I have to talk to you about? I have my notes here. I should. Okay,
So
the other.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I just want to confirm, we have to get permission from the students and their parents?
That's
or
right.
just parents?
Both of the students just sign a form that they are aware that they're being part of this study. And the reason for this is because human subjects requires everyone that participate in a study to be aware that they're being part of a study and that they are aware of the risks, and that if at any time they want to stop participation, they can do it. But that's why I was trying to explain that in your case, you are teaching with this program in your class, right? And you're still gonna teach this program in your class, regardless of whether or not your kids want to participate in the study, meaning that regardless of whether we collect or not collect data from them. So yes, students need to sign the letter being aware, and they sign it online the way you sign it online after we create the accounts for them. Did that make more sense?
It does. Yeah, it does.
Okay. The other thing, after they sign up consents and they're ready to start, we need to do the pre-test. And it's very important that that you explain what a pre-test is, or what this assessment. You may not want to use the term pre-test, but you can tell them that you're going to be doing a quick check up of how much they have learned in the past about science and about the science topics that you're about to teach. That it is okay if they don't know the answers to some of the questions that that are going to be in the test, that they can just skip them, leave them blank, or write I don't know, it's fine. This is a pre-test assessment, and we're going to use this as formative data, because we're going to send you the results of this assessment so you can see what the students already know and what information they're missing. Like, for example, last year, we learned that because we do a lot of data analysis and graphing, we knew that most of your students knew how to read graphs, but there were a few students that didn't know how to read graphs. And then we provide that information to you so you can know which students you need to go over and explain to them how to read graphs, because they're going to be using data a lot. So when they do the pre-test, they're going to do it online. They need to have their account, log into their account, then access the quiz. And it is important that the students don't click in any of the images that are in the quiz, because it will kick them out of the quiz, and they will have to click on the quiz again and start all over. However, if for any reason, if they get kicked out, you can, they can start where they left off. Just skip the questions that they already answered and continue where they left off. Everything is saved every single time the students take the test, automatically through our website. So there shouldn't be any issues with that. Any questions on that?
Fatima, I've got a question.
Sure.
Do teachers all send their ESCOLAR login information directly to me, or is that something that they can include in the spreadsheet with all of their students' information?
Good question, Bailey. They can put their username here where it says third grade. They can change the name, and they can write their information there. As long as they share it with us somehow in this spreadsheet, we're good, because we need their username, like I said, to link it to the account.
Okay, thank you. So everybody just make sure you include your own teacher login in the spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? I think I covered everything I needed to go over. How for you to create your account, then log in, we're gonna give you access to the units links later, the pretest information. And finally, there's gonna be at the end of today's training a survey that we would like you to answer. We'll send you the link. We'll put the link on the chat once we're ready. But this is a survey about today's training as well as the one that happened on Thursday. So keep that in mind. And I think that's it. I did it in 20 minutes for you, Jamie. Any questions on that? Oh, one more thing, I'm sorry. I did forget the teacher training tools. I mentioned it, but I didn't share it with you. This training, this online training course is important because it has a lot of resources that you can use. It's right here. So once that you log in to that website, you click on resources, teacher tools. And there are a lot of navigation options here. This is a general information about how our website was created, how our units are structured, and how we teach with the NGSS approach. So we encourage you to spend some time and go through the different links here. We talk about student access. We talk about a unit instruction, how we have word maps, reading activities, and Jamie's gonna go about the specifics of the unit. We have reading supports for students. Anywhere in our website, students can use the text-to-speech. Students can take notes. That is at the end of each sentence in a unit. I'll show you this so you can see how it works. So there is an option for students to take notes. They save their notes and they show up at the bottom of the website. The students, they can take voice notes here with this option as well. Going back to the training course, the videos have captions, and then you will see how we're introducing vocabulary now in our website. Teacher surveys, answer kits are now embedded for elementary school teachers in the teacher guides. You'll see that. We have what we call now storylines here. So all of the notes that students take can be accessed through this link, so they can see them all combined here as well. It opens in a link based on class, things that you can see. And we provide information into how to use all the resources here. We used to spend time going over all of these before, like we did a half-a-day training session just to go over all of these. And since we created the online tutorial, we allow teachers to do it on their own. But if after you go over this training on your own, you have questions and you are not sure how to use those resources, please let us know. Any questions about the teacher tools? Okay, great. Now they are all yours, Jamie.
Thanks, Fatima. That's going to be so helpful when everyone gets started, and such a great site that you have for all the things in one place. I'm going to share my screen. Give me a second. Hoping you guys all had a really great few days and are getting to know your kids and all of their quirks and pieces and parts that make them such great people. I don't know when you guys are starting this unit, but whenever you do, it is just overall, I've seen this unit being taught. A little background behind is I worked with a third grade team at the American school in Shanghai. It's a diplomat school out there, and we worked together to build this, and then I kind of added more and kept building on it as I learned more as a curriculum developer. And so I can tell you from experience, it's a great community builder as well. If you have any social studies units around building community, this is another kind of great add-on to that as well. So I'll start off right away with our agenda for the day or for the afternoon. We're going to do a quick grounding, and then I'm going to jump into really the big ideas of this whole unit. What does it look like? What are the, we talked last time about the 3 dimensions. What are the 3 dimensions being specifically taught in this unit? And then I'm going to break down each of the units with some student examples, some video examples, and I'm hoping I can get all the way down to the team project piece where you can see how we incorporate engineering into the science learning. So if you would, in the chat, just a quick, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would you live and why? And then we'll kind of talk about it on the side. I'm going to try to figure out how can I still see the chat. So got a couple people saying anywhere warm. A lot of people want to be in Tennessee. Okay, there's a variety, and I like some of these different reasons. As you're looking at other people's answers, you might notice a general reason why. And the reason I brought this as our grounding was to think about oftentimes we choose to stay somewhere, live somewhere because of the weather, or despite the weather, I guess, for many reasons. But our choices in places change. So I noticed someone put like Australia for January. Well, yeah, it's summer in Australia at that time, and some of our kids may not know that January or Christmas time isn't snowing for everybody. Or to think about, I want to be in this place because I want to see the snow. And so when would I go there? Do I go in January? Do I not go in January? So just this is kind of a nice way to also get your kids thinking about weather as well, without it being like, tell me what you know about weather, but just getting a little bit of their prior knowledge. Like we know, like, oh, if I go to this place, will be great. But maybe they just want to go because that's where their grandma is in January and they want to be right near family. So you can kind of see where their brains are and what they're thinking about in that sense. So thanks for playing. And we'll move forward to learning a little bit about where our students are coming from and where they're going. So with the NGSS, and probably similar to what you guys have there, is by the end of grade 2, students have learned a bit about weather, about just that there's snow and there's wind and there's rain and there's temperature, and they may have done like graphing the weather in first or second or kindergarten, and what's the weather out today, or what do people wear in different weather conditions. And they might notice a pattern of seasons, and it usually sticks to pretty local K through 2. By the end of grade 5, we're looking at something a little bit more specific. They're looking at how is weather recorded? What are some of the conditions that cause different weather events? And we're actually moving from just a weather event to the concept of climate, and that weather is an event that happens, like what's the weather today, but the climate in our region is a pattern that we would see over time. So the climate in Hawaii, for example, is a tropical climate. But the weather today in Hawaii, it might be raining, or it might be really, really sunny and no chance of rain. So that's kind of where we're going by the end of grade 5. How this connects to our unit right now. So if you just take a minute to read this, I'm going to talk general about this. Weather is going to be our starting point. I apologize for the sound. Weather is our starting point, and we're going to be looking, you will probably want to have your students looking at local weather, or even just any types of weather that they know. We'll be moving from weather to understanding that there's a pattern in weather, that weather doesn't just happen randomly, that there is actually something like seasons that are connected to weather, and that in different parts of the world, the weather is different or maybe even the same at specific times of the year. And then moving from that weather piece to saying, well, in this part of the world, it is mostly cold all year round. Or in this part of the world, we have 4 distinct seasons. And understanding that that means that there's a specific climate. They'll also be looking into the extreme weather that happens around the world, and how people design or to try to help prevent damages from that extreme weather. And that's where the engineering piece comes in. And one of the things I like to remind students of, and I think it's a huge piece, is that we as humans, we cannot control the weather. We can't control the climate. We can't change it and say, you're not going to rain today. But what we as humans can do is eliminate some of the hazards by using engineering to reduce the impact of that, to help either living things, us, other animals, plants, or to help in any other way that is needed, dams and rivers and things like that. This unit also has a great math integration. So if you guys have a graphing unit, what I've done in the past with teams is kind of jigged around their math units and had them do their graphing unit during the science unit. So then you sometimes will get a larger chunk of time. And I know how in elementary school time is of the essence, and sometimes science gets a little squeezed out. So if you can integrate science into your math, or your math into your science, or put it together, this unit does it really well for your graphing unit. I'm going to keep going, and then I'll pause at some point and kind of take a breath and see what questions you guys have. This unit in particular is a really fun unit, looking at the big question, the big driving question. We talked last time about the driving question board, and your big driving question is, why are homes different? Why are homes designed differently around the world? And it's going to start off with the phenomena of a bunch of pictures of homes. And they are everything from homes on stilts to homes with rounded roofs to flat roofs to homes made with clay or brick and skyscrapers and all different types of homes. And without telling them the question, you're going to be asking them just to observe these photos and take notes. What do you notice? What do you wonder? and getting them to dive into that phenomena. And then over the course of the unit, as you go through, they're going to be using the practices, using the cross-cutting concepts to do and think about science, to figure out why. Now, some students will say quickly, it's different because the weather's different. Okay. We then need to go back to one of our practices, and we're going to be really asking students to give us evidence. How do you know? That's going to be your thing that you say to the kids. Oh, really? Oh, how do you know? What evidence do you have to go with that? As a scientist, we need some solid evidence for that. And that will help guide us through that unit. One of the great things in this is that, again, at the end, we have like a design. I don't know if you've worked with the engineering cycle or a designing cycle, but we'll be taking them through a quick designing cycle to do some engineering projects at the end. And again, that will use all the evidence that they've done throughout the unit to make sure that they actually can build something and have the evidence of why they need to build that and why it's important. So we're going to go back a little bit, and I'm going to ask you guys to think to yourselves about this unit, about the that's coming up. And you've got your practices, and you've got your cross-cutting concepts, and we also have what we call the DCIs, or the contents piece. And the big idea of this unit is every location has a climate pattern. The location in regards to the latitude on Earth determines what the climate will be. So we look at, how far away are we from the equator? That tells us what our climate's going to be. So that's the big aha at the end. You'll see kids being like, oh, everything here in the middle, it's hot all the time. And as you get further away, like there we go to our polars. So I'm going to ask you guys if anyone can collectively, not anyone particular, but we'll try this as a collective. As a collective, do you think we could name all of the practices? You can put it into the group chat and see if we can, as a group, if we can get them all. Name as many as you can, and then we'll do a add-on. Anyone have something to add on to that? As a reminder, the practices are the things that the scientists do. So if you're not sure of the exact name, you can even just think like, oh, what is it that they do? And then pop it into the group chat. Or if you want to say it out loud, feel free. That's easier. Yeah, there we go. Got 3, got a few more. Yep. Nice. Nice work, guys. All right, and I think you got most of them. Yep. As we go through, I think the one that I noticed a lot of people had pieces of was around the conducting investigations, because that is like such a broad one. And that has like all the things. That has your conducting investigations, obviously, but it has your hypothesizing, it has your doing experiments and things like that. Again, I know these sound similar, analyzing data and using mathematics, but they're a little bit different in the sense that this is really data oriented, and the using mathematics would be more around modeling of relations or ratios, or you might be doing measurements, things like that. A lot of you guys talked about the communicating information and arguing from evidence. again, these three are your very language heavy, right? So as we go through, you're going to notice that this unit really is a language heavy unit. So if you have students who have language differences or are English language learners, this will be something that you're going to be looking to scaffold. And there are some scaffold pieces in this unit to help you out with that. The first practice, there's going to be a few practices that are specifically taught in this unit. It doesn't mean you don't do these other ones. It just means that we're assessing these particular ones. So we'll be looking at analyzing data, and we talked about that. Fatima mentioned that briefly. We'll be doing a lot of graphing of weather and through bar graphs and picture graphs and analyzing that data. Using that data as evidence. And so one of the great things to teach your students at this time is to say, hey, evidence is based off of data. And what we know now as adults is that you can interpret a graph in so many different ways and make it whatever evidence you want. And that's a little bit of kind of the understanding how science works, is that depending on how you make your graph is dependent on what story that tells, right? This is a great time for your math integration and some of the things that you might think about adding into your math lesson, especially if your students have some difficulty with graphing, or they might need some scaffolding with graphing, is to do some of this in your math lesson and taking maybe some time to teach them how to graph. There will be a section in lesson 3 where they're going to make their own graph based off of a set of data. So if that's something that they're not familiar with, it's a great time to introduce labeling of your graph, introduce either bar graphs, picture graphs, and then if you really want to extend yourself, like the idea that scientists may have a bar graph or a line graph, and why would they have one versus the other? And then again, I believe in 3rd grade, I'm not sure, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's when they start doing scaled graphs. So they're looking at like, okay, this is not just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but like this is our set of like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And that's going to be important for them to do as well, to understand as well during that 3rd lesson. So one thing you might consider, if you have the time for it, is to kind of have a double lesson, like a math science together lesson, if you're able to do those two together, or bring it back later. If you're doing the graphing unit later, you can be like, hey, remember we did this in science before? And yeah. The other practice we have is arguing from evidence. The teacher tool, again, that you'll be using is to talk like a scientist. You'll be looking at using maybe your teacher or science talk moves, summary charts, discourse moves, and I'll email those to you. I have a little link, and I'll send that to Bailey to kind of send out to you guys as well as part of the whole kit of things. It'll be a great time for you to not only express and share with them how you want them to speak, but also model it yourself. So you might be saying things like, oh, I heard you say X, Y, Z. I heard you say that, you know, the weather is always hot in the summer or always hot in June. But I disagree, because I've been to some places in June where it's not hot there. In Australia, it's very cold in June. So learning how to argue with evidence, or based on the data that I found, it's actually very cold in the Southern Hemisphere in June. So teaching them how to talk to each other and use evidence, not just say, because I know, right? The other practice is around communicating information. So this is around evaluating information, and obtaining information, which means that's a lot of your reading and evaluating what you read or listen to. And then from there, taking it and turning it into evidence. So this is a very kind of a nonfiction skill. So if you've taught that skill before, you might need to use what they've learned in second grade since it's the beginning of the year. If you do this unit later, they may have already had that skill taught to them, but the skill around taking information that they've read, interpreting it, and then using it as evidence to support a claim that they have. So for example, if they're reading all about hurricanes and they want to take some of that information and say, you know what, I know that hurricanes have a lot of precipitation and really high heat. I think that this event was a hurricane. They've taken some of the stuff that they've read, they've interpreted it, and now they've put it into a claim. Later, you'll see the start of this unit is kind of this there's a, or the middle of this unit, there's a mystery house, and they will need to have a claim of what happened to this mystery house. And this is where a lot of the synthesizing of this information will come. It's, again, like I said before, it is definitely something they have to teach. We have to explicitly teach them how to take some of that scientific information. Using models, you'll see that the very beginning of this unit is about modeling how they think something happens, what it happened. It's this house that's built, like really crazy house that's built, funny looking. And they're going to have to just model out, why would this house be built this way? Like, what would be the purpose of that? What questions do you have around this model of a house? And they'll also be creating their own models. This might be a drawing themselves. It's going to be a physical model of a house. This also includes math models in the future, just so you know, but we won't be using math models in this unit. So as we look at these three practices, what might we see students doing a lot of in this unit? And I've kind of alluded to it a few times. And it kind of goes back to what our illusion of science lessons are. A lot of times, and I'm kind of the first to kind of move towards, I want it to all be experiments, because I love that experience for students, and I want them all to be hands-on activities. But if we look at this, yes, there's going to be some hands-on activities, and there's going to be a lot of like towards the end engineering projects. But throughout most of this unit, we're really teaching students to use these skills, these practices, and helping them practice taking in information, communicating that information, arguing with evidence, so making a claim and having evidence. They get that evidence from their data that they've collected. And another way that they might argue with their evidence or communicate information would be through a model. So a lot of this might not seem like the science that we are used to in the past, or the really fun lessons. They're still fun, but they're not the ones that maybe we had experienced in the past, where it's just that, and then we'll still have some of those pieces in there, but a lot of the time is going to be around teaching how to do these practices. Again, we have our concepts, which is how we want the kids to be talking about or thinking about the science. In this unit, it's around patterns and cause and effect. So I'll give you guys a minute to look at this and think to yourself, when we talk about weather, what are some of the patterns you might be sharing with your students, or what might some patterns like initially they might see or think about? If we go back to the beginning, when everyone was like, oh, I'd like to be here in Tennessee, I'd like to be in Australia, I'd like to be anywhere warm. Well, that's your knowledge of a pattern, right? That in January, there are some places that have the weather that you prefer or the environment that you prefer. That's a pattern, right? And you can predict that in January, it's going to be a certain way in a certain place, right? And cause and effect is something that you're going to see again and again. And you can actually test and explain that change or explain that effect. And we're going to see something to around weather all the time. I'm going to share with you guys, this is something I used to live in San Francisco, and a friend of mine sent me this. And it's just like, oh, San Francisco, it's in a microclimate. Everywhere else is having these massive heat waves. And the pattern is that San Francisco is always cold when everyone else is hot because it's of where it's located. And then in October, November, it starts to get really warm. And the rest of California is in hundreds. I would cross the bridge in San Francisco, cross the Golden Gate Bridge for work, and it'd be 100 degrees, and I cross the bridge back to get home, and it's 60 degrees. I need my jacket again. So that's a pattern, and that's a cause and effect right there. That affects, the wind affects it, the fog affects it, affects my outfits, right? What you're going to wear and how you're going to pack. This is a quick one, and you'll see this written out through the unit, but there's different ways that if you have students that would like to be extended, or there's different ways that you want to build your students' inquiry past where the unit is, you might have, you might have students looking at different zones of where is summer and who has the longest summers. You might have them do some extensions around mapping if they've done some geography pieces. And if you can get to the library and get loads of books from your local library, your school library, just about climates around the world, homes around the world, and just kind of have that in your classroom. That's a great kind of silent reading time, or get a book and do some personal inquiry around that. If your students come in without any experience with seasons taught yet, you will need to do some review of that. Again, we talked about the science words, and these are a couple examples of some tier 2, some tier 3 words, meaning that, for example, equator is a tier 3 word. It's just the equator. There isn't another meaning for it. It's not used in any other situation but talking about the equator. Whereas climate, we can use that in both science, we can use that in a description of a person or a place. So being able to help them get that vocabulary word, they might not be able to say the word equator, but they'll be able to say, like, oh, there's that line in the middle. And you or your classmates, the teachers, peer teachers, they could say, oh, there's a name for that middle. What's the name of that middle? That middle of our earth, that imaginary line where it's so hot all the time. Then you give them that word, like, let's use the science word, it's the equator, right? Well, before I move on, is there any questions kind of about where the big picture of this unit? And I'm going to go into each lesson specifically, but is there any clarifications you guys are thinking about? You can write it in the chat, or you can say it out loud. Or is there anything around the practices that you're wondering or concerned about? This was kind of a review of Tuesday. So if you didn't get a chance to see Tuesdays, I would suggest you, when the video is ready, to take a look at that as well, because this was a speedy version of Tuesday.
So I have a question. I don't know if this has been asked before. What do you typically think of as like the amount of time we should spend on each lesson?
It's a really good question. In the unit, there is kind of a time breakdown. Since there's 3 lessons, each of those lessons actually are like kind of a multiple day piece. So I would probably say like one lesson might be, depending on how much time you have each day, would be about a week-ish of time.
Okay, so one lesson might take about a week.
Yeah.
Okay, because I typically have about 25 to 30 minutes, like 4 days a week.
25 to 30 minutes, 4 days a week. So I would say you could probably get it done in about a week and a half.
Okay. Okay.
And this also is dependent on the time of year you're doing it. So if it's at the start of the year, we all know that kids are getting into the groove, right? It might take longer than towards the end of the year when they're, better writers, better communicators. And that's with any science unit that you have.
Okay. And sorry,
kids right now,
I have another question.
Yeah.
So do you guys as a company have expectations on when you want us to do this, or is it just kind of when it feels right within our curriculum?
I think Fatima, or Bailey, can you answer that question?
Yes, I can answer that. No, we don't we have flexibility. You can do it anytime this year. Although we recommend that teachers use it together, like if we can coordinate all teachers start around the same time and move on the same pace. The reason for that is because there is a forum where students share what they've been learning, what they've been doing, and students in other classes see forums from everywhere, and they really like seeing their comments that they get from what they post and exchanging communication with the students in the forum. But no, it's not required. You can do it anytime that is convenient to you. What we require is that you do the activities, that you do the assessments, the pre-post and post-test assessment, and the surveys, and that's it.
Yeah,
Thank
and if Jamie, if I can jump in as well, this is Jennifer Rodabaugh. As long as our teachers are following along those lines of the science pacing guide for our district, whenever they're ready for this to fall into play with the current standards they're working with, that'll be an appropriate time.
Is that helpful, Amanda?
Yes, thank you.
And that does bring me to what I want to share with you guys. Bailey sent you this email that had all the teacher materials. And Fatima kind of briefly talked about this idea of a storyline. And the reason it's not like a lesson plan is that it really is a story that we're telling. We're telling the story of how homes are designed differently around the world, why we have different looking roofs, why some homes can have a balcony and some need, window. I can't think of the name of it, but the window shields, right? Because of all the hurricanes and the wind. What you'll see is at the start of it is all of kind of the assessment piece that we just talked about, the cross-cutting concepts and the practices. What are we looking at to assess? And then as you get through, you'll see lesson 1. And this kind of goes back to Amanda, your question is like how long things take. And you're going to see that within each lesson, there's kind of there's an engagement. So this is engagement 1. And then there's an engagement 2, engagement 3, and that's the end of lesson 1. In each engagement, it'll tell you a bit how long that engagement is going to take. So this should take about 45 minutes, plus or minus. This is also dependent on you and your students and everything like that. It'll explain to you which specific practice and concepts we're looking at in this lesson. So in this first lesson, it's going to be really about this first engagement within the first lesson about modeling. And then the next engagement is again, we're doing some modeling. We're taking that driving question board a little bit further. And then actually we start our driving question board in engagement 3. As you go through the storyline, you're going to see lesson 2. So you can go through and see the whole entire unit of what they're going to be doing and what they'll figure out. And you can also go into the actual specific teacher guide. And the teacher guide, what's really nice about it is that it breaks it down to the point where you can, if you used Readers and Writers Workshop or anything like that, it has a lot of the teacher language in there to help guide you, but it's not so scripted. But you can see that it breaks down kind of how many minutes these things should take. As you kind of engage your kids, it should take about 5 to 10 minutes for this first part. And then you can see again the estimated time allotted. What would be interesting is, as a team, if you guys discuss and find out like, oh, you know what, this part is taking me a lot longer. It's a great way to look to your teammates or to even your instructional coaches to find out like how or why it's taking shorter or longer. But you'll see in here are where there's independent work and possible questions that students might be asking, possible answers to different questions that are on there. And so I'm going to take you guys back to kind of the intro to that first lesson. And so as we look at it, the big idea of that whole first lesson is just that homes are designed differently and that scientists ask investigatable questions to better understand why a pattern occurs. They'll figure out that not all homes look the same, and there are several different styles of roofs, windows, materials, and design elements that a home could have. This is really that starting point of getting them into that driving question board and getting them ready to be in that science mode. This is where we get the buy-in from all the students we talked about last time, and a starting point that we all have in common together. This is your phenomena, right? It's, all of these different homes here, like you can see, like, I wonder why do people live in homes that doesn't have doors, right? Will this break? So these are questions that are coming up, and what we can do when we get to the driving question boards, we can take some of these questions and make them investigatable. So something like, why do people live in sand houses? Well, what would be an investigatable question is you as the teacher can turn and go, oh, so you're wondering, like, what materials do people build homes from? Or what materials would help people live safely in a home? Great, let's turn that into an investigatable question, right? You'll also see in lesson 1, there's this picture of like, I call it like the UFO looking house. And they're gonna look at this house, and together you're gonna be independently and then together, like, oh, why is this house? What do you notice? What do you wonder about this house, right? Students were wondering, is there a balcony? Why is it shaped that way? Is that on a beach? Do other houses look the same nearby? How did they get in there? Is there an elevator? Right, so these are all questions, and some of them are not investigatable, but we're really trying to just teach the students to be curious, to wonder, not just to look at something and walk away, right? As you get into it, you're going to be having them then have their driving question board. And here are some examples from other classes. And this, again, creates buy-in for all students, and it's a common starting point. What this looks like is What this looks like for you in the classroom is that they've looked at all the homes, they've looked at all these different homes, they've done some wondering about it, they've done some notices, they've modeled, try to figure out about what this is all about. And then we're kind of going, you know what, we want to know why homes are designed differently around the world. That's our starting big, what we call our driving question. And in lesson 1, you're going to have them then work independently. I call it their alone zone. Work in their alone zone to say, all right, what questions do you have that would help us answer this big question? So what do you want to know? Or what do you not know about? So you can see here some examples are, how does climate change the material of the house? Or why does building a home, what does building a home actually look like? Where does wind come from, right? Some of the kids are starting to connect weather and away. In their alone zone, again, it's, I would say maybe what, depending on the timing of your students and what their writing skills are, 10, 15 minutes, write alone all the questions you have about these different homes or about that would help you answer this question. Then they get into partners and they start to talk and communicate, share their questions with each other. Then from that piece, they're going to say, okay, you as partners, if Fatima and I were partners, we would share, she would share hers, I would share mine. And then we'd figure out which 2 questions we want to share as partners. So that might mean it's a question for me and a question from her list. It might mean 2 questions from her list, or it might mean 2 questions from my list, or it might mean that we've kind of blended in a question and come up with a new one that we figured out. The goal is at the end that everyone is holding up a question and they've put it up on the board. They've shared it with the class and they've put it up either on the board digitally or physically. One option here is, you can see this has been this driving question board, and I believe this one here has been collected as, these are all questions about wind, right? Or these are all questions about weather, and these are all questions about materials and designing, and these are all questions about something else. So you can have them actually start to group it up and go, oh, you know what, we have a bunch of questions about where these homes are located. So that might be one of our first things we try to figure out, is where are these homes located? And that actually takes us to the next lesson. So it's the illusion of that they've come up with this next piece to investigate. We're guiding, it's a guided inquiry with the idea that we know what they're going to ask. We have an idea of what questions are going to come up. If not, there are ways as the teacher that I put in there for you to help guide me. Like, you know, it looks like a lot of people are wondering, like, what's, you know, plant a question in there. Oh, a lot of people are wondering where this is located. Does anyone know where all these houses are from? And oh no, oh, you don't? We should add that to our driving question board, right? So little drama, little add a piece in there if needed, but usually the questions from our lessons come up and we can bring it back to this driving question board. Any questions about lesson 1? I know you have the links to them, so if anyone wants to look through them as I'm talking and something comes up, please feel free. This is a good time, or if you need to email me later after you've taken a look through it. Any big wonders? Anything that feels really familiar, that maybe you've done something similar to this? For other units, maybe social studies or science or something like that.
I just put the link on the chat in case people don't have it available for lesson 1.
Okay, great. I will say that if this part is done really well and it's given a good amount of time, it is a solid base to the rest of your teaching, to the rest of your unit, because you can constantly go back to it and help anchor yourself into the big why are we doing what we're doing. So you can see here, like, there was even some students who started to figure out where these homes were located. So they started to kind of add to, like, putting an arrow on the class map of like, oh, I think this home is located here. And they were starting to make these evidence-based claims. They were saying, I think it's located here because XYZ, right? Homes in this location snow a lot. And so I believe it's in this climate zone, right? Lesson 2 is where we start to get into it. So lesson 1 is all about anchoring into the phenomena, getting buy-in, developing our scientific questions, learning to communicate with our science team. And now we're looking into one of the first big things that students ask, which is, well, where are these homes located? What's the weather like where these homes are located? And so that's what we're going to do. We try to figure out what weather looks like in different parts of the world. We're going to figure out that weather, if it's happening again and again, year after year at the same time, well, you know what? We name that now. We're going to name that pattern climate. So we're going to use that word. So, weather that happens again and again and again over a long period of time, that has that pattern, that actually has another name. It's not just weather, it's called climate. And we'll be using a different type of graphing. And I think it's a fun way to teach kids that graphs aren't just like this little box with little boxes inside, and it's not just a bar graph, but looking at graphing in a visual form, like a climate zone map. This is a type of graph, right? We're looking at climate in particular areas, and it's more or less where it's located. It's a little bit different, but it's a nice way to explain to them. It's a different way to collect data. Again, it always comes back to connect to the phenomena, right? So I'm going to go over to lesson 2 so you can see quickly what that looks like. And I'll show you I'm going to kind of go a little bit backwards, but at the end of lesson 2, remember we do the summary charts. And in this lesson, you're going to see at the very end that we have a sample of a summary chart for you. This is like an example of what it could look like, what your students might say. It also is a nice way to look at it at the beginning, so you kind of can work backwards a bit. So from doing our climate zone map, what are some of the patterns we notice? Here's some things students might say. I mean, this is a very eloquent way, but they might say something in this kind of fashion. And then we take this idea of this pattern, like we notice all of the places close to the equator or the middle of the earth, whatever our vocabulary is at the time, are warm all year round. So if this is our evidence, these are the things that we saw, this is our data we collected, what did we learn? And this is, we call this a claim with some evidence, and it's a summary, essentially. And it says the earth has, sorry with the typo, is broken into different bands with different temperature patterns in summer and winter. Okay, what else did we learn? Climate depends on where you live and how close you are to the equator. Okay, these are things that we've just learned. There might be more in here. How does this connect to our phenomena? Well, the homes, let's go back to the homes. The homes we saw have different designs because they're located in regions with different climates. Oh, interesting link to that phenomena. That might answer some of our questions that are already up on our driving question board. And we can kind of bring that back up there, right? What are some maybe wonders that you have going forward? We wonder which climate zone each house is located in. Okay, how might we find that out, right? So as you go through, we also are doing an extreme weather map, but you'll see this summary chart adds on and adds on as we go through. Lesson 2 is really about getting to know climate around the world, really understanding what types of weather are located where and what weather looks like. A nice way to start this unit is always, or this lesson is always asking them, what do they already know, right? What are some things you already know about weather? And you could do this in a lot of different ways. This is a sample chart I like to use. It says like, okay, what's what? What do we know about weather? We know that there's droughts, hot and cold. There's snow, there's rain. Okay, well, let's put, and I start organizing them without labeling them yet. I just start organizing like, oh, looks like we talked a lot here about things that are precipitation, that's having to do with the wetness of weather. Oh, and that tornadoes, that's wind. Oh, hurricanes. Ooh, is that having to do with wet precipitation, or is that just wind? We have typhoons, there's droughts. Oh, we're not sure where droughts go. Let's put that, we'll categorize that later, right? So you can kind of make your labels how they work for you, but the 3, wind, temperature, and precipitation, as they start to talk about like, what do they know, or what weather do they know about? This is a nice way to kind of get an intro piece into that. One thing that always comes up, and I have it here as well, is that sometimes students, at least my students, would always name like tsunamis. And it's a good time to clarify, and you could say, yes, tsunamis are extreme, but tsunamis are actually caused by an earthquake underwater versus it being a weather-related event. So that's a nice little clarification you can have on the side, not to like poo-poo what the student was doing, but just to do a clarification and say, but you know what, there are some things that cause, weather does cause a lot of big waves sometimes, right? This is also a great time to go and to find what misconceptions your students have, like I just mentioned with the tsunamis. And also to kind of take in some of these things that you're like, okay, they're going to go way off. These are these wild card ideas, and still recognize them. You're not just saying like, no, we're not, that's not on topic, but yeah, we'll figure that one out later. We're going to categorize it later. And then as you get into it, we're looking at these climate zones, and they're going to be doing a couple things. One, where they're going to be actually color coding their graph and recognizing this pattern. And 2, they'll be naming where a lot of these extreme weathers occur. One great thing to do, if you have the ability to do it, if you have like a good big printer, if you want to print out some other different types of climate maps and have them around, most of them tell the same story. They just look really different, and it's a nice way for students to interact with different types of maps and to understand that they're communicating in different ways, but communicating the same idea. Let me show you just a quick video of some students explaining their climate map. And I'm curious to see, because as I watched it, I had to giggle to myself, because there's a lot of misconceptions that as a teacher, I would probably go back and say, oh, let's have some clarifying questions about this. But they're very confident about their map. But we can see it just really quick. Let me know if you cannot hear it.
So this is our climate map, and it shows the average temperature of a certain country each year, also where extreme weathers occur. And when you see blue, it means that this climate is cold all year long. If you see a purple climate, this climate is cold on winter and hot on summer. If you see an orange climate, this climate is warm on winters and hot on summers. If you see a red climate, this climate is hot all year long. This is our map key. Well, this is a map key of the climate. This is our map key of the places that happen. So dark green means hurricanes, blue means monsoons, light green means tornadoes, white means blizzards, and red means droughts. Okay, so tornadoes mostly happen in North America, in the Tornado Alley. So Tornado Alley is in the Great Plains in the middle of America. And hurricanes mostly happen on oceans and on the coast, like this one here happened on the coast of India.
I'm going to pause us there. One of the things that I love about this is that they're so confident that, some of their coloring is a bit off and some of their ideas of like what the weather is in that area is a little bit off, but you can see that they're really working to communicate what they've figured out. And you can see that there's some of the evidence that they figured out here and there that they're adding in. One teacher tip would be to say, how do you know? Or what evidence do you have that proves this? Or, you know what, I found some evidence here that tells me something different. And it's just a good way to say, not to poo-poo their idea, but to show them that scientists need really solid evidence to communicate their ideas. But it's a nice way to also get them to start feeling like, okay, here's an evidence piece I have, and here's how I'm going to communicate what I've learned. And it also gives you a chance to, as the teacher, to say, like, where are the holes and what I need to kind of add in, what have they missed? And so again, that summary chart that we talked about last time, it's can be typed up. It can be something that you have written out. And then as you talk and teach the students, you can be working with them I apologize. Sorry, my daughter just got back. To how do we talk to each other and how do we use scientific language to communicate with each other. So again, those talk moves piece is really important. Any wonders about lesson 2? That was a quick overview of it, but the summary chart again really helps me as a teacher kind of go back and say, like, what are our goals and what do I want to make sure that students are getting out of these lessons? Well, I know we're almost up for time, but I want to do lesson 3 is my favorite. And so I want to make sure that we get a chance to go through it a bit. Sorry, once. Okay. And this is where the students start taking this evidence that they did in lesson 2 and applying that initial knowledge that they've gathered and using it to create and build. They're going to be put into 2 different types of projects. One is initially going to be teams where they're going to be the experts in a particular type of weather, and they're going to then come together as weather experts to explain what happened to this mystery house. The second project is going to be around building and designing a home that's specific for a region, that they have to figure out what that region is. So we'll talk about what those two look like. So the first part of lesson 3 is they're given this mystery data, and I'll give you a spoiler, unless anyone, actually I'll see if anyone knows the date, their history, weather history. But they're given this data, and this data is from August 2005. And it's the whole month of August in 2005. And it's looking at the different things. So if you're in the temperature group, you would just be looking at the temperature. Then someone else, maybe Bailey, is in the wind group, and she's only looking at the wind speed of that month, right? So here's the student's data on the wind. Then there's another student looking at the precipitation, right? Or how wet it was that month. And again, you can see how they've chosen to their scales, and and you will notice, oh my goodness, on this date it went wild. There was so much precipitation on this day. And oh, you know what? What happens is all the precipitation kids get together and they make their graph. All the wind kids get together and they make their graph together. And all of the temperature kids get together and make their graph together. And the reason this is so important that they do this in these small groups first is then you have those kids that maybe are not going to make a graph or not sure how to make a graph. But to leave that group, you have a graph in your hand. And that might mean that they're getting help from a teammate. It might mean that when you put them into their mixed teams, that you have 2 expert wind people, because you know that one of them might need a little more assistance in their discussion. And as you're going through this, they're gonna notice a pattern, which is gonna be awesome. Oh, hey, I'm gonna share here about my temperature. And I said, here was our data for August 2005. And what we noticed is that on the 25th, the temperature changed drastically and went down really quickly, and then it went back up. Precipitation group starts chatting. Oh, I noticed that we had a giant jump in precipitation around the 25th as well. Oh, what? Wind team has a discussion. Yeah, we had a pattern that we noticed that same thing happened around the 25th, 26th as well. We think that this event that happened to the house happened on this day. So this has given them now, they're an expert in a particular part of weather. They're coming together as a weather expert to become a team, science team, to figure it out. And they're working really well together to come up with their claim. And there's going to be questions on the side here for your kids to answer. And then at the end, they have to come up with a claim to say what they think happened to this mystery house. And you can see students decided to communicate with modeling. Students decided to communicate with words and writing. What's important here isn't so much that they get it right, but that they are using evidence to support their claim. My question is, does anyone know what big weather event happened in August 2005? Any weather history buffs in the group?
Hurricane Katrina?
Yes, that's it. So
what's really cool about this is that students actually will end up reading a lot in the ESCOLAR unit about different events, and Hurricane Katrina comes up, and you'll see students kind of go, oh, like that's the date. And they talk about it being like August 25th, that's the date that something happened. And then they read, it's Hurricane Katrina, and they've put those pieces together. And it's just this big aha exciting moment. Before that, there is this misconception that sometimes students will think it was a tornado. And you may need to do a little bit of, okay, what's the difference between a tornado and a hurricane? You may not. They may know right away that difference, or might not come up. Again, it's important that if you have a student that might find it difficult to communicate their graph, or they might not be able to create that graph in the time you've allotted, to pair them up with another person, expert team. So it might be 2 wind people in a group. And that's just kind of a nice way to differentiate and help those students so that everyone feels like they've been an expert in this group. Here's another example. They're trying to explain what happened to this house. The wind came and broke the windows, and there's a huge wind here, and lots of rain, and they do this unit was done mid-year, so just so you know from the writing aspect of how they're writing. Or was it no, it's the beginning of the year. It's their first unit. Sorry, it's their first unit. And then I know I don't want to keep you much longer, but I'm going to do a quick thing around this design challenge, because I know on Tuesday we talked about project-based learning, and this is kind of where project-based learning and your NGSS blend beautifully in together, because now we've taken all this information and they're going to be challenged. Yes, Fatima.
I'm sorry. We are out of time, Jamie, and I don't want you to rush this. And I think it's best if you pass, unless everybody agrees on staying. I know your daughter is anxious to see you too, so.
I guess I'm really happy to pause here and do this when you guys get to this piece. I can do another quickie with you guys, or if there's any we can end with some clarifying questions, or things that you are still wanting to know in regards to the unit.
Jennifer, do you want to speak on behalf of your group on this?
Sure. I was waiting to see if anybody had questions. If I remember last year, the same thing happened to us with training, that we didn't actually get to break down the design challenge with Jamie. But she is very responsive. If we get to that point and we're having questions about the lesson setup, I'm sure that we could all reach out to Jamie. I have a group of teachers that have taught this unit already. I have supported them teaching that unit. So I can help support that design challenge. So we could maybe play that by ear and see if people would like to do one more meeting or training, we can do that. Or if they want to venture out and just reach out via email, we could do that as well, if everybody's comfortable with that.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. The last thing I have for everybody, I just put in the chat the link to the survey, and you don't have to do it at this moment. You can do it tomorrow or over the weekend, and as long as you have it ready submitted by Monday, that'll be great. It is about what you went over today, when you went over last Tuesday, some feedback for us in terms of how to improve this session will be great. And just a warning, this is an online survey, and it was done in a platform where we do the quizzes for students, just because it is the most reliable way for us to collect data without missing anything now that we're doing things online. but you'll see that every time you submit a response, a sad face shows up in the side, like if you got that answer incorrectly. But it's just because those questions are not right or wrong answers. The system just doesn't allow us to select all of them as right answers. So sorry, I apologize. Just ignore the sad faces. Your response is good, whatever you enter there. And yeah, that's it. Please submit this survey to us when you have a chance. I don't have anything. Jamie, if you wanna just finish our meeting with any other remarks.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just off video for a minute, but I just want to say that I hope that you guys really enjoy teaching this unit. My email is, you guys have my email. I'm always available for a quick check-in or quick chat if there's a clarification. And just to remember that it's giving your students a lot of time and patience to learn how to talk and discuss like a scientist. And then the more that you model, the better that they'll be. It's new. It was new for me when I did it as well. So it's an exciting time to just try it out. And I can't wait to get your feedback and hear how it goes with your kids. And I hope they have so much fun figuring this out. And coming from someone who's just moving to a whole new climate in Chicago, I can't wait to see how they figure out what the world is, open up their world a little bit more as well. If there's any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat and or say it out loud. But hope you have a great school year.
Thank you, Jamie. And for all my Anderson County people, I've copied the survey link and I will email that out later to you because you won't be able to access it until you actually set up your ESCOLAR account. So I will send that out to you here in just a few minutes. Thank you all for staying.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.